Now, I want to introduce you to a industry figure, a man that has been thinking about innovation for a long time. He's a former chief media and e-commerce officer at Mondelez, which was the company known as Kraft Foods. You all know it. He launched a 5-year campaign to increase e-commerce revenues from less than 100 million, e-commerce from less than 100 million, to $1 billion in a few years. He's a highly regarded pioneer and a visionary in digital transformation across his company. He believes that, and he will tell you, that by rethinking innovation, you can fundamentally transform an industry and capture the goals and imaginations of the consumers. I've actually had the pleasure of seeing him and speaking with him on different occasions, and I always learn from him. It's my pleasure to introduce Bonin Bough as our keynote speaker.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very, very, very much, sir. Thank you so much. Wow. Such a beautiful group here. I'm very excited to be here. They told me I didn't need to bring my own cup of ice, but I did anyway. Anyway, how are you, Phoenix? Are you guys good? Are you good? Yes, come on. BroadSoft. I feel like my job is done. I landed last night, sold the business for $2 billion. I feel like I should be, but still they're forcing me to come out on stage here, although all the hard work is done. Thank you. I didn't get as big of a percent as I thought I was going to get, oddly. But, you know, whatever, you know, I'm here for the people. So yes, Bonin Bough, currently CEO of Bonin Ventures, host of Cleveland Hustles, I'll talk about that, former chief media and e-commerce officer for an organization named Mondelez International, which has some of the world's most amazing brands, everything from Oreos to Wheat Thins to Triscuit to Trident to Toblerone to Ritz. Before that, I actually ran digital marketing globally for PepsiCo. But in my time at Mondelez, my responsibilities included spending close to $2 billion across the globe on media. We were the 7th largest media buyer in the world, as well as I took our e-com business from below $100 million and put us on the journey to $1 billion in the 18 months that I ran our e-commerce business. But my biggest job at Mondelez was to drive innovation throughout the organization, was to inspire us to think different and create new business models that could ultimately transform our organization and how we thought about the world. One of the big things that we did was, my very first thing was to focus on mobility. So when I came in, we were spending 3% of media in digital, and we moved that to close to 40% by the time I left. We made a pronouncement that we were going to spend 10% of all of our media dollars, becoming one of the largest global mobile buyers of CPG we were going to spend 10% of our media dollars in mobility. What that did was it added close to $3 billion of incremental top-line revenue, as well as almost $300 million of savings to the bottom line. But more importantly is that because we gave an edict, and I'll talk about this, aspirations versus allocations, it forced the entire organization to think about how are they going to address a consumer whose attention had shifted into this mobile platform, and how are we going to do that at scale in a way that drove our business. And that's what I'm going to talk about. And I think what's amazing about the theme of Connections this year is that it's about rethinking innovation. It's not about scrapping everything that you've done. It's not about wholeheartedly changing your entire approach, but it's about rethinking innovation. And what I'm going to talk today about is this idea of hackonomy. How do you create value by breaking things? How do you break what you have today and rebuild it with the same building blocks but in a different way, and point yourself at the consumer in a new approach that can ultimately create greater value? I did leave Mondelez to work on a project with this man, LeBron James. The funny thing is everybody's like, wow, Bonin, you're so tall. I'm like, no, LeBron is sitting on a chair, people. I am standing. Let's just be very, very, very clear. But the idea here was to revitalize neighborhoods by investing in entrepreneurs, small businesses. Many of you service this group, SMBs. The crazy thing is that entrepreneurship is actually under attack in this country. 10% less small businesses will be open this year than last year. 80% of them actually fail because of 2 reasons. 1, they don't know how to significantly grow, which we are bringing that expertise from the industry. And 2, they don't have access to capital. So what we decided to do was deploy capital in Cleveland. We are now going going to Detroit after this. $1 million we deployed in Cleveland. We built 4 businesses. We employed 62 people. That's the other thing, is that if we're really going to make America great again from a job perspective, it's about employing and creating jobs. Job creation, the #1 largest employer are small businesses in the US, and so we tried to help do that. I'll talk about some lessons learned from that. But the love of my life and the hardest thing I've ever done was I did write a book. I wrote a book called Text Me. Originally, the book was called Digilance, and I tried to find a publisher that was going to reinvent publishing with me, rethink innovation around publishing. And I found this publisher and said, yes, we can't wait to reinvent publishing with you. I said, oh my God, I'm so amazed. So the book was The Freakonomics of the Mobile Generation. It looks at the untalked about and undiscussed impact that mobile's had on every single aspect of life, from dating to religion to parenting to memory, and it's 120 interviews with everybody from Dick Costello, at the time who was CEO of Twitter, to Carolyn Everson, to Peter Guber, owner of the Dodgers and the Warriors, to Deepak Chopra, to Pharrell, and everybody in between. But we were sitting in a coffee shop with the researcher, and I realized we hadn't talked to enough people. And we made the decision to put my phone number on the cover. And I ran back to the publisher, and I said, I have a way to transform publishing. I'm going to put my phone number on the cover. They said, get out. We didn't want to transform publishing. We just lied to you. Wanted your book deal. So I bought the book back, and we published it with my phone number on the cover. I'll talk about what I've learned, because this audience, more than anything, understands that the consumer is not only shifted to mobility, but the messaging space has become a place where not only do we talk to our loved ones, but we are now generating leads and creating business. And how can we take advantage of that? So, I have invested as a result of that in messaging technology companies. In fact, I have 14, everything from customer service, AI apps, to platforms that allow me to connect with consumers, what I use for my phone, how do you manage those messaging. I just think that this space is exploding beyond the companies I've invested in, but now we're moving into enterprise and how that's going to transform the way that we actually do business on this messaging platform, so much so that I quit so I could invest in those technologies. I'm going to skip that, sorry. So, our journey begins in the 1950s. If you were a marketer in the 1950s, and I came into your office and I said, you know what? I want you to invest in this thing called television. You would say, you know what I want you to do, Bonin? I want you to get out. I just get kicked out of offices. That's kind of my MO. I want you to get out because this thing called radio works really well for me. But 3 bold brands decided to jump in because what they saw was that consumer consumption of television began to eclipse where investment was going. And it was in that delta that they actually built competitive advantage. And that's what I would argue today. How do we identify where consumer shifts are happening? In fact, I would argue that today we see the same thing. 40% of media is consumed on a mobile device, still less than 10% of spending actually goes into mobility. Which means that the boardrooms of most organizations look something like this, where there's a CEO in the front that says, you know what, I think we need a mobile strategy. And then somebody looks up from their device very distracted and says, I'm sorry, but did you say something? But what's amazing, it's not just boardrooms, but it's society at large. We have become the most distracted society in human history. But the amazing thing about humans is we'll never admit that we're distracted. We'll say, no, keep talking to me while I'm texting because I'm doing something that I call multitasking. You see, I'm a multitasker. But in reality, what they are is they're liars. There was a study that was done by the American Psychiatric Association. They took 2 groups. They asked one to use mobile phones and multitask, and they asked the second group to smoke marijuana. There was a 10-point drop. Some of you might have been in that group, it sounds like. There was a 10-point drop in those that use mobile, a 10-point drop in the IQ of those that use mobile phones to multitask, which was twice as much as those that smoke marijuana. So if you take anything away from me today, it's that you're better off being a pothead than pretending that you can multitask. But still, yes, there we go. But still, in the face of these glaring facts, I still get the same question, but Bonin is mobile at scale. I said, so we did a little bit of research. It turns out there are 7 billion people on Earth, 5.1 billion own a cell phone and message, but only 4.2 billion own a toothbrush. So it means there are 1 billion people that didn't get the text message on the importance of hygiene, but also clearly if mobile phones are at scale, if toothbrushes are at scale, then clearly mobile phones are. But people say, you know, we don't care about your stats. We want to understand a younger generation. Tell us what a younger generation thinks, the millennials. So we've updated it. Turns out 96% own a cell phone, 93% own a toothbrush, but only 90% use deodorant. 10% of an entire generation smell. Some of them might be sitting next to you. I apologize for that, but it's also a market opportunity. I love this slide. It says, honk if you love Jesus, text while driving if you want to meet him. Even our religious institutions understand the importance of mobility, but yet we're still slow to react. How many people in here have ever thought that their phone was vibrating, but when they reach in their pockets to grab it, they realize it wasn't? Raise your hand. Yes, every single person should have their hands up. It's not just you. It's actually a disease. It's called phantom vibration syndrome. They say that people who experience it have a tactile hallucination, which is vaguely similar to meth addicts. Other studies show that using your mobile device and messaging is as addictive as cocaine. So there's somebody in a dark alley going, please, just send me a message, emoji, a bitmoji, I'm fiending, please, help me out here. And while we're strung out on this technology, it's having huge impacts on society that we're not talking about. So when we released the book, I had to test the technology because texting with over 12,000 people is not easy. You can't just do it on iMessage. You need to have some kind of technology around it. So we tested the book. I tested at South by Southwest. The very first question we asked was, what's the last thing you look at before you go to sleep? Your partner or your cell phone? Right? You guys are like, oh, God damn it. I got to get a divorce or a better phone plan. Some guy was so pissed, he's like, I hate you, Bonin, so much. Now I have to make it a point to look at my partner before I go to bed instead of my cell phone. I said, you know what, you're welcome, and I charge for dating advice. Just text back yes, and I'll auto bill. No, you guys are working on that, right? No problem. No problem. This is the right group to talk about. It was interesting. A younger generation talked to us about how it's changed dating. Women, millennial women appreciated that it was no longer being preyed upon in these online dating scenes because it was a double opt-in. Men talked about how they no longer have to be afraid to be rejected because now you've already swiped right. You know the person wants to meet you. I was like, you know what? I got rejected most of my life. It builds character. Screw you, millennials. Dating. We also talked about parenting. What's the average age you think you should give a kid a cell phone? Somebody yell out a number. 11, something else. 13, anything else? Okay, 11, 13, 12 was the average. Whoever said 11 and 13, BroadSoft's going to give you a gift. I don't know what it is. Good luck. But they got $2 billion to purchase. They got it. I mean, they can afford it. 12 happened to be our average. But what was more interesting is that parents told us that they're worried about the death of hierarchy. There was a time when you go, look, Johnny, I don't care what Bonin says, do not smoke marijuana. And now little Johnny goes, well, that's funny because your college roommate just put photos of you doing bong hits up on Facebook, and it turned out, or you could be like, the sky is blue because it's blue. Now they're like, well, actually, there's a scientific reason for it. So what happens to the death of hierarchy? Or the death of rebellion. I used to be able to lie to my parents and say, yeah, I'm going to Johnny's house, and I'd get there eventually, but they didn't know the path that I took or what I did in between. Now we literally have GPS in their pocket. Carolyn Everson, the number 3 of Facebook, said, I can't wait until there's a chip in my daughter's head so I know where they are every second of the day. I was like, first of all, Carolyn, you're crazy. 2, I'm glad I'm not your daughter. Not that I could pull that off. Or when I went to college, I would talk to my parents if I was lucky or unlucky, depends on how you look at it, maybe once a week. But now, there's a constant flow of communication. So if this was supposed to be the moment in time when you left your parental unit and you became the adult that you were going to be, does that transition actually happen anymore? Very interesting philosophical impact that it's having on society. The other thing we learned, it turns out 80% of newborn babies have their photo up on social media within the first hour of their birth. So the very first thing they see is dad with an iPhone, or maybe Android because he can't afford an iPhone. And he's going, hey, hey. Sorry, anybody from Android here? I apologize. Never invited back. Oh, smile, smile. The baby's like, I can't smile, I'm being born. Can we do this later? But in that delta, the camera guy's laughing, that's amazing. In that delta, you realize there's an opportunity. So I thought to myself, 20%, that's a big number, I'll take that. So ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Nelfie, the newborn selfie. No child left behind, people. We can make birth great again, people. We can do this together. You guys have the connections. I've got some concepts. We can make this happen. We've also turned pee time into me time. People told us the thing they hate most about their phone is that they take it to the bathroom with you. I said, you know what I hate most? Is that you tell me that you're taking your phone to the bathroom with you. I'm a perfect stranger and I'm texting you back from the stall, so we both got issues. People told us stories about having to lie to their friends about having to go to the bathroom so they could check Instagram and Facebook. Here's a social construct that we created and suggested that it's rude to text while you're at dinner. Now we create social constructs so that we can go and do the behavior that we really want. So it's this odd impact that it's had on social behavior in a way that we never had before. Oh, sorry, this is a big idea. I figured all this time spent in stalls, charging stations, and stalls. Who's with me? This is like Uber, guys. Don't miss out on this one, I promise you. It's gonna be big. I have my phone out because I'm gonna read something. So, platform I recommend you guys get familiar with, the platform called Zingle. Sarah Blakely, who is the founder of Spanx, it's actually her brother. And it's a platform that allows you to put metadata, or small businesses texting with consumers, put metadata, manage multiple inbound streams. Maybe BroadSoft wants to buy them with their newly acquired dollars. I'm an investor and I'd appreciate that. Anyway, more importantly is that these platforms have also become so personal. So one of the things we have to think about is, as consumer attention is shifting to these platforms, how are we prepared to connect with them in this most personal environment? So when I get a text message, over 12,000, usually people don't know what to say. They just saw a number on the book. So they write back, hey. So I'm like, that's all you got? Hey, back. I don't have time for this. Or hi. I'm like, hi back to you too. Sometimes I'll provoke them like, do you want something? Or people are like, I don't know, I randomly texted this person, what should I say? So here's a person who texted me, hi. So I write hi back. So they go, took you long enough for a phone number found on the title of a textbook. I thought I'd get a response much sooner. LOL. Gotta put LOL so you know I'm being jovial. I'm like, first of all, thank you for explaining what LOL means. I wrote a whole book on texting. I think I got that. But thanks for the info. I happen to be traveling, that's why I didn't respond immediately. She writes, they write, I don't know who the person is, so they come in with a number. They write, I mean, it's not a textbook, it's a marketing book. You should get an autoresponder for this. So I go, yeah, I didn't want to do an autoresponder because it didn't feel genuine. But did you read the book? No, I was browsing the section where the book was and curiosity kicked in. Well, I'm glad you were curious enough to text, but I must say it's a good book if you ever have a chance to read it. LOL. Right back at you. I'm good at this LOL thing too. They write back, I'll give it a look over next time I'm in Barnes, which apparently is the abbreviation Barnes & Noble. I just thought it was nothing because Barnes might not be around. But anyway, anybody from Barnes & Noble's here? Okay, good luck with that. I just can't wait till it's like Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and the rest of the world. In related news, sorry, I don't even know what it's about. I just thought it would be interesting to see what happens if I text a number. I write back, it's about mobile culture. Think Freakonomics of the mobile generation looks at the undiscussed and not talked about impact that mobile's had on every aspect of life, from dating to religion to memory and more. Ha ha ha. Speak about dating definitely ruined my last relationship. I was a texter, he was a caller, we were doomed from the start. LOL. I'm like, first of all, this is really deep, and I don't know if you understand. I wouldn't use LOL in this situation. Like, you're talking about ruining your life. I don't know. Do you understand? Maybe I should explain to you. It's about being jovial, as we discussed earlier. I go, do tell me more. Actually, the book is interviews from 120 people, and I decided to put my number on the cover so I could talk to more people about how it's changing their lives. People like you. Did you guys meet on a dating app? No. We were college sweethearts. So how did the phone bring on what you seem to think was the inevitable? Well, I find that because I text so much, I have a hard time articulating myself on my feet. You can't Google the definition of a word mid-conversation to make sure you're using it correctly. You can't take too long to respond, or people will perceive you as not too bright. You can't edit your words mid-conversation. My ex is a life coach, motivational speaker, soon-to-be author, Marine, and has the charisma of a politician. Communicating with him is a struggle for me. I even had panic attacks when I needed to communicate anything serious to him. So now I'm like, I am definitely not qualified for this. This is way too deep. Way deep for me. I'm just your average receptionist with dreams of being an entrepreneur, but no ideas of how to materialize them or where to start. So I write back, wait, sounds like you're very perceptive and self-aware, so I'm sure you're a rock star. Maybe it was not you who had a hard time communicating. Maybe he was just so used to speaking that he didn't know how to listen. So come on, that's nice, guys. Please, a little bit. Oh, come on. I'm doing my best here, so I'm random text message with some person. Well, I don't know. I write back, what's the idea you want to launch? She never wrote back. Clearly not an entrepreneur. But what I found interesting, and I have conversations of this type all the time. What I find interesting is how personal people are willing to be in this platform. And that's what we have to think about, which is in a world where, oh, sorry, forgot about those two slides. Next one. Okay, in a world where, how personal these platforms are, in a world where consumer attention is shifting to messaging. In fact, in 2011, only one of the top 10 downloaded apps in the world was a messaging app, and that happened to be Skype, which who even knows if that exists anymore. Anyway, now 8 of the most opened apps, top 10 downloaded apps, are actually messaging apps. And so 5 billion people are using messaging apps today. 4 to 5 minutes is actually spent in messaging. We are shifting our attention to this platform. It's where you communicate with your loved ones, where you communicate with the people who mean the most in your world, where you communicate with the most important business partners. Business is being transacted. I worked with PC Richards on an approach to turn their salespeople. By the way, their salespeople were already giving their phone number out and texting with potential prospects, but nobody was capturing that data. Nobody was doing analysis. In a world where business is shifting there, how do we begin to shift our attention? How do we begin to build opportunities there? And more importantly, how do we begin to understand how consumers want to be communicated? And so when we rethink innovation, I think it's not about transforming totally how we do business, but understanding how do we rethink where we focus on, and how do we apply what we've learned over the past to what the potential future can be. And so I began to ask myself, okay, with all these changes, who's going to teach us how to harness this power? Well, I looked at our current institution, and it turns out they're not going to do it. Less than 1% of the course descriptions of the top 100 business schools even use the word mobile, emerging, or digital technology. So the institutions that were supposed to teach leadership and thought leadership of this new generation are actually failing us. So I asked myself, well, where do I look? So I began to look at organizations. Well, turns out organizations over the last 100 years have been able to create very little value. But organizations that are new, the digital organizations that we think about, have been able to create a ton of value in a very short period of time by rethinking innovation. So what is it? It turns out it has nothing to do with the amount of time an organization has been around. So here's Mailbox that was bought for $100 million within the first 4 months of its existence. It also has nothing to do with the number of people. 13 people created Instagram, which was bought for $1 billion, 13 people. It also has nothing to do with the industry. So the industrial industry is being revolutionized by players like MakerBot, and you guys know all of 3D printing, GE's transformation, $403 million they were bought for. It also has nothing to do with geography. It turns out there are 100 places that look something like Silicon Valley, Silicon Alley, Silicon Lane, Silicon Beach, Silicon Forest. You're like, with all this intelligence, can't you come up with a better name than just Silicon something? Please help me out here, people. This should be Arizona, Silicon Hot. You know how it is. Somebody's like, yeah, it was hot, man. This golf course was rough. Anyway, corporate events. So it also has nothing to do with the age. All these kids have one thing in common. They're all founders. The kid on your far left created an app called Bustin' Jeeber. You guys laugh. He gave a TED Talk. I'm talking to you. You see where my career's at, right? Okay. Let's get back on track. It also has nothing to do with education. Peter Thiel is paying kids to drop out of college because he believes he can unlock greater value by helping them rethink their approach to the world and ultimately innovation. And he might be right. When you look at folks like Zuckerberg or Sergey, both dropped out of college, created Facebook and Google. You look at folks like Karp, who created Tumblr and didn't even have a high school diploma. And he sold it for $1 billion to Yahoo. Now I know what you're saying. You're like, look, Bonin, Marissa Mayer was desperate. She would buy anything. You might be right. Is Marissa here? No. Okay, good. Sorry. You might be right. But my point is that we continue to see examples of that working. It's interesting because, there's a slide missing. Sorry, my fault. I think we jumped one. Anyway, Bonin Bough and Campaign Magazine. I know, there's no joke behind it. The joke here was that what documents culture today are seeing our digital celebrities on covers of what documents culture today, Bonin Bough being on one of them. Anyway, the big important point here is this one, which is, so what is it? What is it about these organizations, their approach, their culture, and their mindset that has allowed them to create greater value? And as a result of that, how can every single one of us take a piece of that learning and apply it to our business? So I believe it's this. It's the notion of being a hacker. It's the notion of breaking what we've created to unlock value again for tomorrow. If you go into the walls of Facebook, they have a sign that says, the journey is only 1% complete. But what's more amazing is that everybody who works at Facebook believes that the journey's only 1% complete. They can't buy any more billion-dollar businesses. They're only 1% complete. They will take over the world. Even the janitor's like, I'm only 1% done. I got to keep going. I'm 1% done. They believe that what they created today is not where value is going to come from tomorrow. So how do they break what they've created to reinvent what they need to do for tomorrow, for a new approach? And that's what I've been talking about, which is this idea of hackonomy. How do you begin to create value by breaking things? And if there's anything I want you to leave with today, it's really, how do I break my thinking today? How do I break my organizational process today? How do I break what I do on a daily basis today to unlock greater value for tomorrow? How do I find those ways to rethink what I do today to find value on the other side tomorrow? And I'll show some case studies towards the end of our talk here of how we did that at a large organization. But first, some of the best things have actually been created by hacks. So the like button was created in 48 hours at a hackathon, ultimately changed our life. Or here's a company called Open Airplane. They believe that they're hacking the airline industry to create a company that looks more like Uber for airplanes. Now, I travel all the time. I'm never like, oh, I just need an airplane. Oh, it's only 5 minutes away? Okay, great. So, not all ideas will work, but at least they're trying. Here's a guy named Stellog who's hacking the notion of humanity. In his arm, he's got a 3D printed ear. In that ear, he's got a Bluetooth microphone. When his phone rings, he can answer it by talking into the ear on his arm. Can you hear me now? Hello? Can you hear me now? You get it? Here, ear? No? Okay. Joke never works. But I keep trying. One day an audience will laugh at that. In his mouth, he's got speakers implanted. So when somebody talks, he moves his mouth and another voice comes out if it's somebody else talking from in his mouth, questioning our notion of what humanity means in the future. Here's a guy named Hugh Hare. I recommend you watch his TED Talk. He is challenging and hacking humanity for a more noble purpose, which is to turn disability into ability. His story's pretty simple. At 17 years old, he was considered the world's #1 mountain climber. He was climbing with his best friend. They hit a blizzard. His best friend died. He lost both of his legs. A week after he came back from the hospital, his brother realized that he wanted to climb so much that he took him out climbing on his prosthetics. As he was climbing, he chipped a toe. But he realized that he could actually climb better with that chipped toe. He came home and he began to hack his prosthetics. And he actually learned that he could create prosthetics that allowed him to climb better than even his human limbs allowed him. So as a D student, he decided he was going to dedicate his life from turning disability into ability. Now he's a doctor at MIT and considered the world's first bionics. These limbs, they're bionic limbs that he believes he can get down to $3,000. He can run, he can jump. They operate just like human limbs. When you push down, they push back. I was speaking in London. He spoke after me, and somebody asked him a question. First of all, I learned that everything I was saying was meaningless because this guy's changing the world. But don't let that register. Anyway, my point is that somebody asked him. They said, "Do you ever see a time when somebody would opt to have a bionic limb over a human limb?" And he said, "Well, let me answer it this way: if your 73-year-old arthritic arm didn't operate like your 18-year-old one did, and there was no complications, what decision would you make?" Hush over the crowd like there is right now. Because at that moment, we realized that we might be becoming more bionic than we actually are human. And that this idea of the singularity, where there's a rupture in the fabric of human history, might actually come true. Pace, the world is changing faster than we even think. Here's a woman named Amy Webb who's hacking social networks so that she can find the love of her life, and she wrote a book about it, and she is still happily married. So I began to point my attention to how do I connect with the consumer who's changing in a landscape that's changing? How do I begin to hack the approach to media and consumer connection? And I came up with this model. We came up with this model. And the first is rethink mobility. You guys are familiar with it. But mobile is more than a channel. It is a utility that you have with you every single moment of the day. How do we begin to create more utility for the consumer on this device? How do we make sure that they're engaging with our platforms to create value for themselves, for their customers, and ultimately for their business? And then real-time engagement. How do we rethink how we connect with the consumer on a continual basis? Whether that's a Facebook post, whether that's a message, but more important to me is how do we then create businesses that react to consumer demands in real time? What does real-time business look like? And I'll show some examples. Monetizing media. How do we create platforms that we own? P&G used to own the media that consumers watch. How do we create platforms that we own and rethink the approach to investment? And the reason why I'm going to talk about this case study is because as you think about your businesses, we were always spending media. It wasn't about not spending media, but it was about rethinking how we invest those media dollars and creating platforms that could perform better for us, that could connect with the consumer in different ways. Aspirations versus allocation is meaningless. It's one thing to aspire to be the #1 mobile marketer in the world. It's another thing to actually allocate the resources and dollars. So as you look at your aspirations, ask yourself, are you spending and investing enough to actually accomplish those? TV versus video, we begin to see the world vastly different. It wasn't about channel versus channel. It was about how do we communicate a message to a consumer on every single channel that they touch, and culture versus cluster, which I implore you to think about. No longer do we need to think about customers in very boxed-like demographic layout, so 18 to 24, Hispanic. But what ties them together is cultural or need states that are greater. So how do you think about the need states of your customer and then begin to build products and platforms that service those need states? So the very first thing we did, as I mentioned, was we announced that we were going to spend 10% of our money in mobile, leading us to be the #1 mobile marketer in the world 2 years in a row. But the idea here was really investing behind what our aspirations were. The next thing we had to do is we had to learn about this thing called real time. Facebook, real time, how do we do this? This is 6 years ago. This is a brand called Nilla Wafers. Nilla was an entrepreneurial brand, which means good luck, you don't have any money, be entrepreneurial. Go, let's figure it out. So what we did here was, instead of treating it like traditional advertising where you would sit in a room, a bunch of executives, the creative would present to you, and you say, this one is the thing, take it to the top of the mountain and send it to my disciples, and they too shall follow. We said instead of that, let's use these platforms to actually get real consumer reaction. So we launched 5 different types of campaigns, or 5 different types of creative, and we let consumers tell us which ones they liked the most. The one that won was one called Momisms. This was the very first one. It says, the best families are like fudge, mostly sweet with lots of nuts. We began to evolve that, and we began to put sketches of the actual consumer on it, and here's where we got to. So good moms let you lick the beaters, great moms turn them off first. If you want breakfast in bed, then sleep in the kitchen. Hey, Jay-Z, thanks for stocking your villa with Nilla. We were trying to be relevant. And then culturally approved, your kid's a royal, mine's a royal pain. The birth of the royal family, of course. What we learned was that if we paid attention to consumers, very limited amount of investment could actually drive huge impact. And so this campaign actually, with $620,000 just spent on Facebook, moved $149 million business by 9%. Actually, technically it's 9.8%, but legal always made me round down, but I no longer work for them anymore, so it doesn't matter. 9.8 people, welcome to the unabashed version of Bonin. 9.8%. But then we applied that thinking to rethink a channel that we were more comfortable in, which was television, and we launched this.
A little brought to you by credit is usually it. But tonight, we have a product too important. Because tonight, it's Wheat Thins. Wheat Thins, crunch is calling. And the call is coming from inside your mouth. Get out of there. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Steven, how important could Wheat Thins be? Yeah, I used to think that way too. Until I received this actual memo from Wheat Thins, detailing for my sponsorship purposes what the role of Wheat Thins is in our lives. And let me tell you something. You think you know Wheat Thins? You. You and the cracker you wrote in on. Okay? Now listen up.
So, 7 minutes this goes on for, by the way. Hilarious. Definitely watch it. What's interesting is that we had gone back 3 times, and he finally called us and was like, look, I'm just going to read the brand brief on TV, take it or leave it. We were like, Colbert, stop yelling at us. We'll take whatever you can. Yeah, please. We had gone back and forth. He read the brand brief, clearly one of the funnier moments from an integration that we had. But at the same time, Viacom had launched a thing called Clip and Share, and it was the first time they allowed you to clip 30-second piece of the content and share it on your social channel. So we had a whole team standing by to clip and share these on our social channels. Goes crazy, as you can imagine. We're clipping, we're sharing, we're clipping, we're sharing. People love it. It's going all over the place. 2 weeks later, when we got back and we looked at the Nielsen report, we actually saw that we were able to reach more people on the social channel than we actually reach from the television buy. So it made us think, okay, as we begin to rethink innovation, rethink the approach to the consumer, imagine if we started planning a campaign from the very beginning that took into account all of the potential digital, social, and traditional TV channels. And we ended up launching this piece of work that was really about rethinking innovation and planning from the beginning how to connect with the consumer in a vastly different way.
If I had to describe my parents, my dad would be like the smart one and everything. And then my papa would be, he's a funny one.
It's just me and him. We kind of take it as, all right, this is all we got. This is our team right here, and nothing's gonna break this team up.
American families have changed.
Sometimes we get looks just from being a mixed family.
And while they may look different, they're still as wholesome as ever. And who better to say this than the beloved brand American families grew up with?
Honey Maid. Everyday wholesome snacks for every wholesome family.
This campaign was the first time an American brand had so clearly stood up for all families.
Uh-oh. Is that me in the back? Should I go forward? Okay. Okay. Wow, we tested it and it worked yesterday. Okay, so should we play it? You want to cue the audio? In an attempt to normalize sin, so we didn't back down. We took two artists and we rolled up all of the negative quotes and we created a sculpture around it, and it turned into a sculpture of love. But the best thing that we did was we took all the positive comments, we rolled those up with 90% more, and we created a full sculpture that showcased how many people love. Most progressive campaign, best response ever, brilliant response from Forbes, awesome response, #1 watched commercial for the week that it aired. 270 million social impressions, 250 million PR. I've never done this, but it seems kind of fun this way. But maybe this graph tells it best. We took a brand, this is the searches on Google. And then when it was launched, okay, that's kind of a joke. Usually they tell it better. Anyway, we took a brand that people love, a trademark, and we took Honey Maid crackers and we turned it into a brand that people love. But I think what was more interesting to me was literally this is a graham cracker. It's a graham cracker, people, that had the ability to connect with consumers on a vastly different way by rethinking how we use every single channel, ultimately 22% growth of our graham cracker on Honey Maid. I'm gonna talk a little bit now about platforms and how we created platforms and rethought the way that we approach media buying. So I went into the office and I said, look, I'm going to take 10% of our media and I'm gonna make us cold hard cash back. And they were like, not possible. I said, no, why? I said, look, why is we're the largest candy company in the world. Why can Candy Crush have 890 million users and make money, and we can't? We're smarter than the Candy Crush guys, trust me. At least, well, one or two of us are. I don't know. I'm told, no, not possible. So I said, okay, well, we're gonna start launching tests. This was one of our first tests. It's interesting because it actually started off, I wasn't planning on going into a mobile game, but two gum brands came to me and they said, we want to build a mobile game. I said, great, let me introduce you to people who build mobile games for a living. They said, we don't need your introductions, we know better than you. So both of them sent $1 million, one got 16,000 downloads, the other one got 26,000 downloads. I was so pissed that I said, you know what, I'm gonna find a brand marketer who actually trusts me, we're gonna crush it, and I'm gonna shove it in your face because that's my marketing, that's my management approach, that's how I manage. So I found a company called Pickpock in New Zealand, which was a game creator. And I told them three things. I said, one, don't desecrate the Oreo, because if you do, I will hunt you down and the sheep that you lay with. Two, by the way, the Kiwis love that. No, I'm just kidding. But the Australians really do love that. But anyway, I'm sure some Aussies. Two is you can get the ritual, twist, lick it, dunk it, and that's great. But three is the most important. Make sure that the game actually makes money. So under the guy's thumb, you can see there's an ad poking out. We actually sold ads inside of the game. We took $175,000, 12 million organic downloads by the time I left, #1 app in 12 countries, 20 billion Oreos dunked, but more important, the game was cash positive. Nobody had ever saw. First of all, 12 million downloads for a game is ridiculous. For a branded game, unheard of. Nobody thought that we could actually begin to make money, that we could rethink the way that we engage with our consumers. More importantly, consumers played this for 2 minutes and 41 seconds. The company that made it said, you know what, we're going to block competitive ads. I said, no, do not do that. If they are stupid enough to pay me money to advertise in my ad, let's get this money, people. We got to get this money. So I took that, and then we proved our next piece, which was we launched a platform called Cheese Rank, which is like BuzzFeed for cheese. 5 reasons to eat stinky cheese, 3 reasons why cheese tastes good in the summer. Ultimately sold ads inside of this. It's brought to you by Ritz Crackers. We had Little Ritz. 18 months later, cash positive. I then embarked on what was our largest monetization platform. 3 years before I left, a guy came to me and said, look, Bonin, I want to drop a guy out of the sky. No parachute, no wingsuit, and he's going to land safely on the ground. Will you do that? I said, yes, I will do that. I went to the organization. I said, look, we're going to drop a guy out of the sky, no parachute. They said, no, you are not going to do that. So for 3 years, I fought to get this thing through. What's interesting is like with innovation, is like most big organizations, they're like, that's a good idea, but kill it, get it, can we squash the innovation, kill the innovation. So I kept trying to move this thing, you can't kill it. No, we're going to get it through, we're going to get it through. Finally, we got it through. And we dropped the guy from 25,000 feet. Here's the video, I think, okay? We dropped the guy from 25,000 feet. I get a phone call right before this is about to happen from the woman who ran it. And she was in tears. She said, they're shutting us down. SAG said it was not safe. Turns out SAG just wanted money. But all the way up until an hour before he actually jumped, I'll let him talk. We actually thought he might have to wear a parachute.
The most dangerous skydiving stunt ever performed from nearly 5 miles up.
5 miles up. Traveling at 120 miles an hour, terminal velocity. You see him taking his parachute off. Now I want you to watch. He's jumping with his brothers. So his brothers are jumping, 300 people in the audience. His brothers will eventually pull their chute. You see him flipping over. He's showing that he can flip over. His brothers will pull the chute, and then all you see is this guy falling faster than you've ever seen. But watch, he's got to flip over, because if he doesn't flip over, he'll crush like a taco. So he flips over. Look at where he lands. Look at where he lands. Look at where he lands. So, #1 rated stunt on television for the year it launched. But what's crazy about that is that he did 86 test jumps where he would jump out, and right before he hit the net, he would pull the parachute. Here's his wife running over. Mom couldn't even watch it. Mom went to the trailer. Like, this was, I've never seen anything like it.
Friends and family, the whole team surrounding.
There we go.
I mean, I'm almost levitating. It's incredible.
Nobody believed it was going to happen. Mad intense, definitely intense. So 86 out of 86 jumps. He pulls the chute right before he lands, and he was dead center every single one of them. The one that really counts, he was 30 feet off of the mark, 20 feet from the craziest death ever, and me getting fired. I was like, Luke, we need to focus here. I need this job, dude. What are you doing? I literally quit after that. The next day I actually quit. It's like, drop the mic. I dropped the guy out of the sky. I dropped the mic. I'm out. You guys take this stride gum thing and do something with it. I'm done. Okay, but really, that was really about how do you rethink the way to engage a consumer. We made $9 million off of that, off of an hour worth of television. No other brand had done that. But how do you take our existing assets, repoint them, and rethink the way that you engage with consumers? And I know Tahir was talking about how you guys have been, how they've been on the journey with you guys to rethink that, and I implore you that those can create value. I'm going to move quick through the last 2 case studies. The next one was really rethinking how we capture data from consumers. This is a recent business that I've worked with, a beauty business. And what I said to them, I said, you know what? This messaging thing has legs. Imagine if you connect with the consumer over messaging. What would you be willing to pay to own the phone number of a consumer? What blows my mind is that Oreo does not know the name of any consumer that buys their product. Would you not give away a free pack of Oreo for $4.50 if a consumer texted you, told you what their name was, and sent you their phone number? $4.50, but yet many of the CPG companies have not even thought about the power that the data of the platforms that you guys are providing to them have. So here's a business called Sundial Shea Moisture, and basically it's a beauty business. And so the very first thing we did was we started off with a hair analyzer. You text us, we text back and go, okay, which one of these hair types are you? Okay, that's your hair type, great. Would you like to see a style? Okay, here's a style, here's a video of how to get that style. Great, you like that style? Here's the product that we recommend. Here's the product that we recommend that you actually buy. Okay, great, and usually on the bottom there's other stores. Where do you want to purchase? Walmart, ShopRite, Target. Oh, Target, okay, great. By the way, you can buy now, or here's a coupon. And in that very simple educational experience, what we did was we captured who you are, what hair type, what style you like, what product we recommended, and where you shop. And then potentially on the back end, did you buy it or did you not? And then I drop you off to actually a beauty specialist which says, oh, by the way, if you have any questions, you can ask me. Automation and human together, the ability to begin to capture data, hyper-personal, and bot and human experience. And people talk about bot. Bots are a small, tiny part of what this industry will be. The real industry will be creating value and creating content creation and then creating services around messaging and around the consumer and, in a new and different way. Okay, I'm going to leave you with one case study. This is it. We're at the finale. I know you're like, thank God, you keep yelling at us. We're so tired of you, Bonin. Get off the stage. Okay, I'm almost done. So we might go 2 minutes over just for the organizer. So here, I remember the very first day I start at Kraft Foods. And they go, we want you to work on this brand called Oreo. I said, I hate you people because I'm not 8 to 12 and I don't own 8 to 12-year-olds. You can own them, right? I think, or they own you. One of those things are right. The brand hadn't been transformed in 50 years. 50 years they hadn't changed their marketing. It was always OREO, twisting and dunk, mom and kid. That was the ad. And by the way, nobody ever challenged it because you know what? Nobody ever got fired for doing that same type of spot. So nobody wanted to challenge it. I walk in the room. We're looking at another OREO spot, like, oh, do you think the kid is sitting on the chair at the right height? I'm like, it doesn't matter, it's the same thing. Just shoot the thing, it's the same thing. Get me out of here, let me work on something more interesting. There was three print ads that were sitting on the wall. One was all white, looked kind of like milk, and it had a quarter of a cookie, and it looked like it was swimming through it. And it said at the bottom, Jaws, 1962 or whatever. I thought, that's kind of culturally relevant. After that, there was one that had the half of the cookie, and it had a boot print in it, and it looked like a moon boot, and it said Mars landing, and whatever the date was. And the other one had an Elvis thing. And I thought to myself, wow, that's actually culturally relevant. The challenge Oreo had was that it was already had 98% penetration. It was stuck between 8 to 12-year-olds or parents of 8 to 12-year-olds and couldn't expand. Nobody thought that it was relevant for them. Whether they were younger, millennial, older, nobody thought it was relevant. So I go to London a week later, and Facebook just announced that they were doing Timeline. It happened to be our 100th anniversary, and I said, you know what, why don't we do, I called the creative agency, I go, look, I got a great idea, I'm creative. Why don't we do a 100-year timeline, fill in some of them with examples, and then consumers can fill in the rest. They were like, worst idea ever, click. I was like, man, first I get kicked out of this publisher, I get thrown out for recommending television, now I can't even get my own creative agency that I pay money to. So they called me back, they said, you know what, better idea. For the next 100 days, we're actually going to create Oreo cookie piece of Facebook content that represents what's relevant in culture today. Ultimately, huge engagement. This post actually was the #1 like post at the time. We had everything from, again, Elvis to Gangnam Style to everything that happened in those 100 days. Hugely relevant. We saw the complexion of our Facebook likes, fans grow to a more millennial, more younger, really began to become relevant. But the most important thing that it did, and this is where I think beginning to rethink innovation and starting with wins, began to let us reposition ourselves as a new communication platform for Oreo. The next thing we did, some of you might have seen it, was Dunk in the Dark. So in the Super Bowl, the lights went out at the Super Bowl. 4 minutes later, we launched this tweet which said, you can still dunk in the dark. Tweet heard around the world. I actually had drove us to buy a Super Bowl spot. I could not tell you to this day what that Super Bowl spot was, but the one thing I know is what this was, and that's the one thing that people saw, but it gave us the courage to go on and actually reinvent, and we launched a new campaign called Wonderfilled. Here it is.
Wonder if I gave an Oreo to the big bad wolf, how would the story go? Would he still go huff and puff, or would he bring those pigs cool stuff to decorate the deck he helped them build? Would they not get killed? Wonder if I gave an Oreo to a vampire in a creepy show, would he not act so unkind?
So, much more relevant. We rolled it out. I moved to China where I actually wrote the book. We rolled it out across the globe, animated, gave us a lot more content that we could quickly cut, recreate, use on social, digital channels, but ultimately drove a huge growth spurt for Oreo, that mixed with some of the things we did around Transformers. But it also led us to say, you know what, if you could see culture through the eyes of an Oreo, which were the 100 days, and then we could create a new culture around Oreo, could we actually allow you to taste culture? And we launched the first ever 3D printed Oreo. Here's a quick video.
South by Southwest Interactive in Austin, Texas. We invited festival goers to the Trending Vending Lounge to participate in an experiment. What would happen if your Oreo cookie joined the social network? Our prototype vending machines take what's trending on Twitter and turns those trends into custom Oreos. Using unique transparent touchscreens, users scroll through a list of trending topics, each related to a particular flavor combination and pattern. Advanced algorithms translate the tweets into custom cookies. In all, there are about 10,000 possible combinations. Users can also mash up two trends to further customize their experience. The resulting cookie combines elements of the two original trends. Once the user hits Make Cookie, the real magic happens. Using some repurposed 3D printing technology and a pneumatic pump system, we've enabled festival attendees to watch as their custom cookie is robotically printed and assembled. The final cookie is dropped into a cup, vended, and is now ready to enjoy.
I know. You guys are all thinking, who's that glass hole? Where did Google Glass? That's still a thing. So we created, people were blown away. They were like, it's like Willy Wonka. How is this possible? You could literally taste like, what Grumpy Cat tasted like. It was turns out it's really hard to actually turn bits into atoms. We had to create our own hyper snacking markup language. There was a lot of work that went into trying to figure out how this thing actually worked. But the craziest thing was our supply chain guy was there. He goes, oh my God, I can't believe people stood in line for 2.5 hours to get a personalized Oreo. I think I can do this at mass. I said, I think I hate you, because now it means that I have to take on e-commerce. And that's what we did. We launched, for the first time ever in 102-year history, we launched the first ever personalized Oreo product shipped directly to consumer. You could go online, you could choose from 2 different images, you could stretch them, you could move them around, you could choose from a hat, a scarf, letters like joy or glow. And again, here's an example of the factory that we created. Took 2 months we actually created this. I'll never forget, we're in the room, and the head of supply chain, there's like 40 of us in this room. Everybody's telling us why we could not do it in 2 months. He said, you know what? Slams on the table. Everybody who doesn't think it's possible, get out now. Everybody left except for 6 people, and then the person who was working for me, a 25-year-old Jen who was working for me. Those 7 people in 2 months created the first ever direct-to-consumer Oreo product that we've ever had, personalized. We had to create new technology with HP. We had to create a bank account, because apparently you can't take credit card at Mondelez. It's like, we're $39 billion, we don't know how to take a credit card. What do you mean, credit cards? So we had to create, but ultimately, the most important thing, I think, was that consumers could go on, and where it says Happy Holidays, they could write whatever they wanted to. And so they could really, truly personalize. We got everything from, will you marry me, to it's a boy. I was like, do not ship that to the wrong person. What do you mean it's a boy? I didn't even know we were trying. What are you talking about? But more importantly, is that a Facebook post began the journey to transform the world's largest cookie by rethinking innovation and ultimately creating what became the bedrock for our billion-dollar e-commerce business. So if I leave you with anything, it's that beginning to put your mindset into how do you rethink innovation, how do you take the steps that are necessary to put that in place can ultimately create greater value, which is what I talked about, hackonomy. How do you create value by breaking things? Again, I'd love to talk to all of you guys. My phone number is 646-759-1837. Feel free to text me. I've already gotten a number of text messages. I'd love to stay in touch. But Alan Kay said that the best way to predict the future was to invent it. But I would argue that the best way to predict the future is to hack it. And with that, thank you so much. I'll be here for the rest of the day. It's been a pleasure. I know I'm a few minutes over. I apologize, sir. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Amazing as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.